and welcome to the new episode of our podcast. Today, I'm really excited to interview our guest, Glenn Dene, who is a photographer and a theatre operating practitioner. He works in the hospital in Abergavenny, if I'm right, Glenn. And why I'm really excited to talk to Glenn is because Glenn lives in the real world and documents it. And he's going to talk to us about his books and his work documenting the care workers, NHS workers in the pandemic. So thanks, Glenn, for joining us. Really excited to chat with you and to hear about your work and particularly the books you produced in this last year. I would like to start really going back to how it all started with you picking up a camera and wanting to capture things. Could you tell us a bit about your journey into it?
Yeah, definitely. I never had any intention of taking up photography whatsoever. And I had children, and it was a case of, I think like everyone these days, you use your mobile phone to take images of your family and your loved ones. And so it was crikey, it was about 6 years ago now. My wife bought me a Nikon camera and a D50-200. And sorry, it wasn't. It was a bridge camera, actually, a Canon. And to be honest, when I opened it, I didn't really know why she actually got me one in the first place. So it stayed in a box for about 6 months, and it was only out of boredom that I actually took a walk along the river and started taking pictures. And then I was just absolutely addicted to it straight away. And it was. We went through a rough period then, with bills, and I was in university and stuff, and I had to sell the camera. I sold a lot of stuff just to pay bills. And so I took about a year out of taking any photos at all. And then for my next birthday, my wife bought me the actual camera I used for COVID as well, which is a Nikon D50-200. And that was, as soon as I had that camera, it was just, you start doing little bits. I started with landscape photography, which was, for me, and still is really something I do when I'm, to do a bit of mindfulness and be out on your own and be with my Labrador as well, my dog Max. So it's, it was a strange start in photography for me, because you got a lot of people who play sports and stuff, and from a young age they want to be something, a footballer or a rugby player, but I never wanted to be a photographer. I think I just got lucky, really.
That's really interesting. So only 6 years ago, really, you sort of started taking, more professional or thinking more about, your photos. So going back a little bit further, because I think you grew up in the valleys, didn't you? Not far from me.
I did. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So do you think now, looking back, there's any resonances to your childhood or what you went through, which is sort of leading you into where you are now as quite a well-known photographer? Do you think there's any moments there? Do you think that perhaps? I'm
not sure, to be honest, because I grew up in Kevin Forest, which is just up from Blackwood, and I spent a lot of time in Blackwood. But we were very sporting family, and it was all about football and rugby in the area I grew up in. So there's no one really in my family that is creative at all. And my mother is from the Trinent originally, and I'm sure the Trinent. So she's always been, if we came up with hobbies and stuff, we try it once, but we weren't. But yeah, it was always sport, and my mother always wanted us to play rugby or football. So I'm quite. My mother used to call me the weird one, to be honest. I got a twin sister as well who's nothing like me, and yeah, she was sort of, I'm not sure, to be honest. There's, I'm the only one that does anything like this in my whole family, and I probably am a little bit of the weird one, I think.
That's got you to where you are, I suppose, isn't it? Yeah. I think that's interesting because, again, our environment. I remember when I was growing up, some bit older than you, obviously, and wanting to be a poet in sort of 80s Blackwood, South Wales, people really thought I was weird again, or avoiding work, or lazy.
it's a you know, if I had told people, you know, it was like when I used to be in the choir in junior school and comprehensive, and I loved it. I was the only boy in there, and my sister got thrown out for punching me actually during rehearsals. But if you were a little bit different when I was growing up, yeah, you weren't really, you know, if you weren't one of the sort of the cool kids type of thing. And I just wanted to fit in. So I think now when I've grown up and become an adult and matured and everything, then you start to sort of be what you're supposed to be in a way, I think. But yeah, it wasn't, no one I knew that was into any photography or anything creative really outside of sport and a few bands, you know, going on and, you know, around the area.
Yeah, that's it. So I suppose that ties in a little bit how, you know, I am quite fascinated about, you know, because you work full time. Am I right in thinking, is it full time?
Yeah, full time. Yeah, which
is amazing to keep on creating as well, because you know it's a battle, as you say, with having children and a mortgage and all those bills. So I suppose, you know, there's part of that past grounding you in reality. Now you're working hard, doing what you're doing, a really valuable job, but then you step aside from that to be an artist as well. Did you find the two slightly difficult to reconcile, or you know, it's just the way you live?
I'm sort of used to it a lot more now, but you know, the reason, you know, there was a time where I could have gone part-time before COVID, because I just had so many, you know, sort of jobs going on outside of my actual full-time job. But I mean, I'm glad I didn't know. But I do find it difficult, not so much now because I'm in a sort of routine. But I find it, you know, I have found it really difficult over the years, because you're trying to, you know, balance everything. But I think my time management has probably gone a lot better than it has before. And yeah, so, you know, with structure and everything now, but if I'm out of my routine and out of my sort of structure that me and my wife sort of put together, then I really struggle. And yeah, so it can be really difficult at times, you know, because it's a long, you know, I've just come off the back of 3 night shifts, 12-hour shifts. And then, you know, I've got more sort of podcasts coming up over the next 2 weeks. So it can be really difficult. Yeah.
Oh, I totally empathize. I can remember, you know, being younger when my kids were young and trying to write and juggle jobs and all that. And it's a push and pull. Sometimes I remember feeling quite angry that I had to go to work and I wanted to write. And then when I had time to write, I felt a bit lost and I needed my anchor of work. So, but I think from your work, which I would love to move on to now about the last book particularly, is that it's grounded in reality. It's grounded in your work. It's like you're an artisan photographer in a way, you know, in a true meaning of of what you want to capture. So, I suppose, perhaps you could introduce or tell our viewers what sparked you to create the book, and document the pandemic. And did you have any, I suppose, reservations in a way, because you know there could be a tendency that it became slightly perhaps voyeuristic or documenting other people's pain, you know, in a way. Because I'm quite interested in that, the role of the artist. You know, how far do we document without perhaps doing something, even though I know you are doing something as well in the work. So I'm rambling a bit now, but I wondered if you could perhaps tell us a bit about the inception of the book and how you did it. It
was, do you know what, Amy Jones, who writes a lot in the book, and she's Dr. Amy Jones. I remember her coming up to me in a trauma theatre the one day, and I was really and you heard about COVID going on, you know, that but none of us were really that worried at the time. And I remember her coming up to me and saying, you know, COVID is going to hit us. We're working together. And she said, we got to start preparing. And after we sort of, you know, unfortunately elective lists, you know, normal operating lists were cancelled, and we started setting up this theatre, and I had this worry. And then I thought to myself, this is the biggest challenge the NHS has ever faced. And I, you know, I'm a big fan of photographers that, and she's passed away now, but Mary Ellen Mark, you know, documentary photographers, and I thought I have to document this, you know. So I got in touch with Judith Paget, who's the chief exec of the trust, and the communications team. Absolutely amazing. They just said, you know, it is you know, it's a big thing. And obviously I know about consent and everything in images and that. And they gave me permission to take photos. And I felt like not the luckiest bloke in the world because a pandemic was hitting, but to have that opportunity to photograph something, as I said, the biggest challenge we faced in my place of work as well, which was, it was an amazing opportunity. I mean, but it is difficult, you know, you're photographing, as you said, then you're photographing, you know, the pain of staff and patients, you know, and on top of that, I was working. I mean, it was, you know, I've only recently reviewed sort of 7,000 images I've taken during the pandemic, and wow. And I've been in touch, and I've had a chat with families and stuff of patients who have passed away, and it's just, yeah, it's been really, really difficult at times. I think it hit me when, you know, we moved from Nevill Hall to, I've moved to the Grange University Hospital now in November, and the staff being so upset really hit me. But I was involved in a case in the Grange where, you know, not in the photography sense, but as a practitioner sense, and listening to family speak to their loved ones, you know, listen to the patient speaking to their loved ones, and then 5 minutes later they passed away, is just heartbreaking. And then I used to go in on my days off to take images, and yeah, you know, if I really feel like something shouldn't be photographed, I'm quite good at stepping back and thinking, right, I'm not going to take that image. I've been in situations where they've been doing CPR, and I've thought to myself, am I sort of exploiting the situation now? Am I trying to make, in my head, I want to make a powerful picture, but it's never always going to happen, you know? And yeah, I think sometimes you've got to think, well, should I be documenting this? And I've done that a lot. You know, I don't want people or the family to see patients having chest compressions, you know, it's just not right. So yeah, but sometimes you feel like, and other people don't understand. So it's like, it's some members of staff. The biggest problem I've had is sort of some members of staff that have not understood what photography is about or how I work. And I've ended up not getting into fights or anything, because I'm not that type of person, but I've ended up sort of, you know, getting into that situation where I question myself. But once they see the images, they understand then, you know, they understand that why I've taken that picture. But it's a fine line, you know, between getting a strong picture, but showing someone's end of life is quite difficult to do. Yeah.
Oh, I totally understand that. It is that, like you said, that fine line between, like, you know, bearing witness, which great art does, and as you said, there's times when you must self-censor and think you can't go that into that space perhaps as well, which again takes me back to you working in that world. It's not like you were a photographer commissioned from a London newspaper to dump into and do it. You know, it's a much more authentic, holistic type of way of working that you've obviously done. Interestingly, I got a good friend who was a nurse in Princess of Wales Hospital in Bridgend, and she, you know, she messaged me about your book, and she doesn't know you, of course, and she just said how moved she was, and how she said it was fantastic that you actually captured these moments, because she had been living that, you know, for 10 months when she got in touch. So so it is
exactly.
It's
sort of you know, you walk around the hospital with a camera, if you're a member of the public or you're member of staff, and people look at you stupid, you know, they're like, it's like you've got a, not sounding too like violent or anything, it's like you've got a gun in your hand, and it's, you know, now and again, like, I get messages about the book and stuff, and this is people that perhaps first didn't really understand why I was taking images, but now they've seen the first book, they're like, it was such a powerful book. And on top of that, you know, I've been really lucky, like Graffeg Publishing, they backed it so much, and it's so great. They're not a huge publisher, but it's so amazing that they just back every decision I made, you know, but every image, what I wanted, what I didn't want. And you know, the book is, I haven't earned a penny from the book or anything that's come after it, because I really wanted the money to come back to us and help. You know, my main thing is sort of mental health stuff, really. So, but yeah, it's a powerful book. And if you had told me I'd been publishing a book on you know, something that we've been going through, I would have laughed at you. There was no way I had any plans on doing it. So yeah, I'm very lucky in that sense.
So I think in this, you know, it may be in 25 years, people will see your book and, wow, we'll be like, you know, such a brave document, and, you know, it helps us remember. And I think that's really important in art.
Yeah.
So it takes me a little bit into, you know, into mental health and the role of photography, perhaps, in it. And you've been very open talking about your own mental health and you know, what you've done to combat things, how you've, you know, gone to the dark side. And I wonder, do you think, you know, well, first off, is your photography a bolster to your mental health, or does it sometimes, obviously after this project, it can also go over the edge as well, take you into another realm?
Yeah, I think it is a bit of a bolster. You know, as you know, my other work that I've done is, you know, photography, very much sort of photography along with sort of writing and anything creative sort of saved my life, to be honest. And, you know, photography for me, when I used to do a hell of a lot of self-portraits and stuff about mental health and how I felt at the time, it really got me through that, going through that creative process of everything. And still now, you know, I still do a lot of self-portraits now. I don't sort of put, with everything going on with COVID and stuff, I tend not to put them online or anything, but I do a lot of self-portraits, and that really helps me sort of express myself and everything. But this time with the sort of, you know, the landscape, again, that is another thing, another tool that I have that I can, you know, for example, you know, yesterday was the end of a busy shift yesterday morning, and, you know, the wife is in work, the kids are in school, and I can go out with the camera, you know, around Abergavenny and as I said earlier on, do a bit of mindfulness and relax. But with the COVID stuff, especially at the moment with other opportunities that it's led to, with, you know, I've had to review my images, as I mentioned earlier, 7,000 images. And you know, I found it quite difficult to, this time I've, you know, it's not like going out and relaxing up in the hills, you know. This time it's, as we said earlier on, it's documenting, especially during the second wave, it's been documenting, there just doesn't seem to be any sort of happiness during the second wave. You know, it's just, you know, more than half of the patients that have come into ITU with COVID, who are COVID positive, have passed away. So it's this time I get quite down over some of the images. But again, I'm lucky to have those things in place to deal with, well, to help with my mental health as well. But no, it has been, looking back on these images, they've moved other people, but because I know the situations of what was going on, they've certainly moved me and made me quite down at times, I think.
No, I can imagine. Yeah, definitely. And it's quite sort of an irony, really, that, you know, we talk a lot about mental health with arts, and yet if we look through history, poets, musicians, painters, writers, you know, it's a lot of people have taken their own lives, you know, gone into huge dark realms of the mind because of what they create as well, isn't it? I'm thinking particularly of someone like Mark Rothko, a painter who I really admire, who ended up taking his own life, you know. And yet his art is almost held up as salvationary type of thing. And so it is a tough balance, you're right. And going back to the books, and my next question was really any books, films, albums, things that are your go-to, you know, bolsters again for peace, happiness, rage, even, you know,
there's probably quite a few. As I said, I got into reading, which I never used to be into, and I like reading anything by whether it's horror or whether it's comedy, you know, Stephen King, Hunter S. Thompson,
Yeah.
And yeah, when it comes to music, it's sort of, I grew up in a sort of grunge era as well. So yeah, anything sort of grunge, but I like sort of, some other bands like Stay Voiceless is just some,
Yeah.
which is a guy I work with. I really like their album.
You did the cover, didn't you, for one of your
I did the
photos?
cover, yeah, and
Right.
that was a self-portrait as well. But music is a big thing for me. I'm sort of discovering things that, musicians and stuff that have always been around, but I've just never even give them a chance.
Yeah.
And yeah, so it's and when it comes to movies, anything my wife picks makes me sort of, that we can sit down and just have a bit of us time, I think.
Yeah. Thank you, Glenn. Okay.
No worries.
Okay. Bit blunt question. Can art and creativity bring us out of anxiety and depression and other traumas?
I think it can, but from my own experience, it's, as I said earlier on, self-portrait sort of brought me out. But then every time I see my old self-portraits, I get triggered, and it's a difficult one. It depends sort of what you're doing to, it depends what type of creativity it is, I think. But as I said, for me, talk about creativity and art and stuff, I can't paint or draw to save my life. But there's nothing better than picking up a cheap canvas from Wilkinson's or something, and just, I don't know, just there's something in that, there's something that I enjoy about that. And it's, I've got sort of, part of my room is full with stuff that, I draw and paint, but it's not for anyone else. It's for me. I just like that process. And yeah, I think it can, but it depends on what type it is. It's, all my influences for, music, and like I play the acoustic now and again, all these people are artists that I think we mentioned earlier on that sort of self-destructed and have died, so it's a difficult one. For me, it's sort of, I'm 50-50 on it, to be honest. And I think, it's a really difficult question, a great question. It's a difficult question to answer.
No, I agree, Glenn. And I think, we can softly say, yes, we'll do a bit of poetry and it'll save us. But it could open up huge chasms of other, things that we need to deal with. And, it's not as simple as that sometimes, isn't it? Like you said, and I think I sometimes see a lot of people as artists, as some can be a bit self-indulgent, obviously, but then there's also the artists who almost like sacrifice themselves, and then we listen to their music or read their poetry. And we are saved. Do you know? It's a strange cycle, perhaps, isn't it?
It is strange. It's weird that I think we mentioned earlier on that we listen to people that or there's photographers that I know that have committed suicide, and they just to be that. I mean, I've been there where you don't care about anything. You just don't. It's sad to say that when I was there, I didn't care about my wife or kids or anything like that. But then at the time, I used to be in this tortured artist type of, I've got to be, if I'm creative, I've got to be a tortured artist type of thing, And, at the moment, my thinking is been for, a few months now that I want to be around for as long as possible to create work. I don't care if no one remembers Glenn Dene or, as long as my family do, I just want images to be remembered, and so I don't want to do one book and then just disappear. I want to put on put out work that is meaningful. It doesn't matter about money or anything like that to me. I just want to put out work.
That's a real powerful message, I think, Glenn. Yeah, thank you for that. And I suppose it's about leveraging those elements where we can find ourselves going into that bearing witness darkness realm, but almost having a slight, objectivity or slight distance sometimes, like you said, to protect ourselves. We have to do that. But if we can create that, and then other people, it's a rolling cycle. Like when I was 20, things touched me. And I hope somewhere along the line, someone will read one of my poems and see your photos, and, it'll spark off something with them, and then we'll be gone. And then the next, it's like a rolling program of creativity. Right. And, we're still fighting type of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
But I like that message you said there. Thank you. It's powerful. On to more of a societal thing, I suppose, if that's okay. You know, I've asked a lot of our guests this, is as we come out of lockdown slowly, how do you think our health and social care system should, if you believe it should change? What things do you think could be put in place? I know it's quite a big question. If you were the health minister in
I think it's proved, the pandemic has proved what we've known all along, really, where the NHS is massively underfunded. You know, and I think what else it's proved as well is that mental health services, not just for patients, because staff are patients as well, but staff has to change massively. But I think it's just it's difficult because you've got one thing that played on our minds when we were during the pandemic was how the waiting times are going to be massively affected, and especially cancer services as well. And I think that it all comes down to money, doesn't it? You know, the one thing we've learned is that, you know, if you didn't believe it before, we're massively underfunded, and you know, if God forbid something like this happens again, a pandemic, we need to make sure that we're continuing cancer services as well, and we're continuing emergency services. But you know, there's got to be more employment as well in the NHS and progression. And you know, you look at somewhere like the Grange now, and I love working there. Don't get me wrong, and it's but we're having a massive problem with efficiency. You know, theatre operating lists and waiting times, and you know, it's one thing to say. I think it was Vaughan Gethin that said, you know, we'll just have to catch up, you know, with waiting times, and it's not that easy. You know, it's a fine line between catching up and burning out your staff. Yeah, it's all about funding, I think, and I'd like to see more mental health support. That's a huge thing for me after seeing so many people break down, and but you know, publicly as well, you know, mental health and cancer services, and you know, diagnosis times as well. So yeah, it's all about money. That's what it is.
Money and will, I suppose.
Definitely.
And the will to do it, isn't it? I suppose, to a point.
Yeah. It's so important, the NHS, and as you know, Patrick, as well. And it's I always knew it was important, and I always knew, you know, I grew up in a Labour sort of area, and my parents loved the NHS, and my grandparents did, but I never realised quite how important it was until the pandemic hit, and how people worked and went above and beyond for not just for the patients, but for each other as well. And you know, it's always been an issue with funding, but we definitely need more funding.
Thank you. Yes. Okay. I suppose coming towards the end of the interview now, really, we have touched upon this, but I suppose to, you know, crystallize it, what would you say, perhaps, or have you got any practical advice, recommendations for people? Well, perhaps twofold, you know, to get into photography. I think that'd be really interesting for people who've seen your book and your work and think, oh, how do I do this? Where do I start, perhaps? And then any final tips for sort of your, you know, for the mental health of our viewers, really, which you've been through. So perhaps two-pronged, about the photography and about tips for getting through it.
Yeah, photography, you know, as we mentioned earlier, I think we mentioned earlier on, there's always there's a few people in the photography world at the moment, professionally, you know, photographers that are a lot bigger than I am, but also locally as well. You know, I've done some talks with different, like Coleg Gwent and stuff like that. But you always come across, I think, someone who's taken up photography. I was really put off by some other photographers, the arrogance, you know, thinking that their images are, you know, the most important images in the world. And no matter how good you are, there's always millions of people better. But that said, it's just backing yourself, I think, you know, and it's taking, even if it's on your mobile phone. That's how I started out, really, was with a mobile phone, taking pictures of my kids. And I think that, you know, it's important to just be true to yourself as well when you photograph what you're into. You know, it's but also not to take yourself too serious. You know, it's I've never taken myself too serious, and I think that's key, really. But if you want to photograph weddings, photograph weddings. It shouldn't matter what other people think. You know, I mean, I was in next door's garden yesterday taking pictures of a couple of flowers, and I just enjoyed the process. You know, the pictures were awful, to be honest with you, but yeah, it's practice. Start out with perhaps a bridge camera and get used to the controls. So yeah, looking after yourself, and when it comes to photography, just do what makes you happy, and don't listen to other people, because you always get the jealous ones that want to put you down, you know.
That's great advice, Glenn. I think so true as well. And I think also in this age of social media, there's a lot of, there's a lot of trolls out there, and this, ignore all that and just, follow that vision that you have and enjoy what I loved what you said about taking pictures of your neighbor's flowers. You just wanted to do it and the process. And that's, that's so important, I think. Yeah. Beautiful word. Beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you, Glenn. Yeah, well, it's been fantastic talking to you. Really, we've gone off on such brilliant tangents, but I think the core message is so important that you share about being creative, looking after yourselves, and having a good balance in life, and enjoying what you do. And very simple things, but great message. And I really think people, when they see your book, will see all that sort of come into one, really. And the other images, I loved all your nature images, because they weren't just, it's like the way you edit things and that really, fantastic,
Thank
so
you.
thank you very much for speaking today, Glenn. Really.
No worries. Thank you very much for having me.